Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another Transformers video. This time, we're going to be looking at two different toy lines for Rise of the Beast to see who did it better, Studio Series or Mainline. Now, I've had this video idea for a little bit now. Of course, I want to hold out until I got my hands on Studio Series Wheeljack. Now that I do have Studio Series Wheeljack, and I have finalized my thoughts on that figure, figured now would be a good time to finally make this video. I just knocked over Jolt. Right, so rules for this are pretty simple. The order I'll be going in is the two Jungle Mission 3 packs in release order. I don't know why these two weren't released at the same time. Like, they were revealed at the same time, so why did the Cheetor, Nightbird, and Wheeljack one come out first, and then we wouldn't get the Bumblebee, Air Razor, Mirage one for like 3 more months? And then the Voyagers, just because, that's the next size class up. Also, I'm disqualifying any characters who got only gimmick figures outside of Studio Series. So that disqualifies, of course, RC, Scorponok, Scourge, Battle, and just Battle Trap. I think he was the only other one. Nightbird's in this video. I feel kind of bad for Battle Trap, honestly, because all he got was that repaint of Bay vs. Ironhide, which is stupid. All right, with all that being said, let's get started with the first Jungle Mission 3 pack and Cheetor. Now, Cheetor is a bit of a weird one because his mainline figure was kind of leaked first, and a lot of people really liked it because it was basically the Beast Wars design run through the movie filter. However, they then revealed the Studio Series figure and gave fans an idea of what the movie design was going to look like. Not a lot of people liked it. Honestly, I was a little put off by it at first, but I like it a decent amount. It's definitely, of the robot modes that we get, it's definitely the least faithful. I think Rhinox and Primal do a better job sort of like emulating the character from Beast Wars than this one does. But I can still kind of see this as just a version of Cheetor who's hardened by a lot of different events, if that makes any sense. So like, I can understand why some people would give this to, I probably should have mentioned, I'll be going robot mode, posability, transformation, and alt mode in that order, just talking about each of them. So yeah, I will give robot mode to the Studio Series one since it is more accurate. I know there's the argument of they barely appeared in the movie, so why does it matter? Because that's the point of Studio Series. I know sometimes they don't always follow that point, but it is still the point. So that's why I think it is reasonable to care about accuracy when accuracy is the goal. I still like the mainline figure for what it is, and I wouldn't argue if someone gave this to the robot mode because it gave this robot mode the point because it they prefer it over the movie design. But for the sake of the video, the movie design is more accurate to the movie, so the Studio Series is more accurate to the movie design, so it gets the point. Posability will go to the mainline, though. He does have pretty much the same range in all of his joints, but he does get a better head and better feet. Worse waist, though, but that doesn't really matter. Transformation still goes to the Studio Series figure, though. It's more simple, but also more enjoyable in that regard. I don't know what it is about the mainline figure, but the wrists never want to stay pegged into the waist on my copy, and getting the cheetah head back into the robot mode is a bit of a pain. And then the alt mode, I have to give it to Studio Series as well, because at the very least, even though it doesn't really look like a cheetah, it is at least one consistent color, unlike Studio Series, which looks like it's wearing pants. Please tell me I'm not the only one who thinks this looks like he's just wearing like a pair of khaki pants. So yeah, between Studio Series Cheetor and Mainline Cheetor, I have to give it to Studio Series. It has a better robot mode, better alt mode, a better transformation, but their posing is pretty much on par for the most part, with the exception of the head and feet. Moving on to Nightbird, and this is, for the most part, one of the first blowouts for Studio Series. I didn't mention this in the intro, but this is an absolute slaughter for Studio Series. They win almost every single figure. So for robot mode, this is actually going to be a tie. And you might think that's because Studio Series Nightbird is just a retool of mainline Nightbird. It actually has nothing to do with that. It's more just the fact that both are decent, but neither of them are great. For one, the mainline figure has all of this bronze. I have no idea why there's so much bronze on this, or why there's bronze to begin with. I know there's bronze accents on this, but they're accents. It's not supposed to be the whole thing, and it even ruins the vehicle mode, which we'll see on the next slide. And while the Studio Series figure is doing a significantly better job, it's still not the perfect proportions. And man, that backpack, that is, I will say the Studio Series figure is much better when I got it in hand, but even I can't look past that gigantic backpack. However, once we move past the robot mode, it's pretty much all smiles all the way down. Articulation goes to Studio Series easily. It has more range in the joints that matter, and it's not clogged up by the sculpt. It's less clunky, I should say. The transformation definitely goes to Studio Series. It's like they took the mainline figure and, removed all of the rough and clunky bits. There's still a minor amount of clunk to it, but it is much less apparent. And then the alt mode is a licensed Nissan, so of course, obviously, it's going to Studio Series. Yeah, they're the alt modes. Sorry about that. But like you'll even see with the mainline one, of course, since they probably didn't have in the budget to include an actual spoiler, they had to make this dumb-looking thing. But also, the entire hood of the mainline's alt mode is just a big piece of bronze that's even creeping up into the windshield. So between both of these, it's got to go to Studio Series. While I am willing to give the robot modes a tie, everything else is in the Studio Series favor. Then there's the figure that delayed this video by like 2 months, if I had to guess. Wheeljack. Or Pablo. It really depends on your preference, but I'm going to be calling him Wheeljack for the sake of the video. Now, of course, I had already given some categories to the Studio Series figure before I got him, because, yeah, obviously, this robot mode is much superior to this one. This one just looks really weird and dumpy. This one has the actual movie proportions, at least from what I can remember. I do remember him looking a little bit more like this. Like, yeah, the door wings are inversed, but I do understand why they're like that for the transformation. And at least they're visible at all, unlike the mainline figure, where the wings just disappear behind his body. Like, come on, you can barely see this. You can barely see this one, and this one is only visible from like this little piece, and then a little piece between his torso and arm. So as far as the robot mode goes, Studio Series takes it. However, while I would say that Studio Series Wheeljack is a good figure, as a toy, I'm a little bit more hesitant. Their posing is pretty much equal for the most part, with Studio Series having slightly deeper elbows. However, the shoulders are definitely worse here. The mainline one has them mounted in the bicep and not the actual, shoulder joint. They're mounted in the arm shoulder and not the torso shoulder, if that makes any sense. And plus, it lacks the butterfly joints that the mainline figure had, so posing will have to go to him. Transformation also goes to mainline. Studio Series, I am getting better at it, but it's still not as good as the mainline Wheeljack's transformation. At the very least, I do like some of the steps, like the feet sliding into the backpack. And it's definitely a less fiddly process than the Studio Series Wheeljack, but that category will have to go to mainline. Unlike the alt mode, which, obviously Studio Series going to win for being a licensed Volkswagen bus. But even if it wasn't licensed, it would probably still win just due to just the mismatch of color in, several spots. Although I guess it is really just the back, but this just isn't as clean of a vehicle than the Studio Series figure. So this is probably going to be the one instance in this video where it's pretty much a tie. So like, if you want a good-looking figure of Wheeljack that you're only okay with transforming if you want him in the other mode, then I'd say Studio Series. But if you want a fun figure of Wheeljack, then maybe go with mainline, but you do have to deal with the torso falling in half. Honestly, my best recommendation is just to get the Beast Weaponizer Wheeljack. This is the one time I'll mention a gimmick figure in this video, because honestly, this is just the best of all worlds. It's it looks like him, but it's also a fun play experience. Obviously, it doesn't look as much like him as the Studio Series figure, but it's pretty much the same size as all three of them. All three of these figures are really the same size in both modes, but this definitely has the best play experience while still having the issues of the mainline figure. If anything, this one looks the least like the character, but if you're looking for like the most fun version of Wheeljack, then I'd say definitely go with this one. Plus, it's cheaper and you can still find it in stores. So that's a wrap for Jungle Mission 3-pack 1. Let's move on to the second one, starting with Bumblebee. And you know how I said that Nightbird was a complete slaughter for Studio Series? Yeah, that's nothing. This. Oh, good God. From dog shit F tier to dog shit S tier, this is quite the jump. Robot mode, do we even need to argue? Studio Series is way better. It's not perfect. It's got the wheels here on his back and the wheels jutting off of his shins, but it is much better than the complete kitchen table hanging off of mainline Bumblebee's back. Not to mention, even though I'm pretty sure their torsos are the same size, on the mainline figure, it looks way smaller. And what even are those legs? You've got some long legs. And also, the weapons aren't as good on this one. I like the idea, but I just like the gun and blade a lot more, if I'm being honest. Would have been cool if at least one of them had the battle mask head, but, alas, even then, like, just everything. The only thing that the mainline figure gets right is the wheel placement on his back. Everything else is a catastrophe. Posing, I'd say, is almost the same, with two big problems. For one, the knees on the mainline figure are detented. Why? And the torso, the upper chest, likes to come apart whenever you try to move the arms or head. So just for that, just for the fact that the Studio Series figure holds together way better, I have to give it to that. Transformation, also Studio Series. Like, this one's okay, but it doesn't really like working with you. It's more of a shell forming process than anything. And as for alt modes, again, it has to go to Studio Series. Like, yes, I know the Studio Series figure has the arms hanging out from the underside, but the mainline figure also has that. You have to parts form the off-road pieces on. At the very least, you have that option, but if you want them on, then you have to keep those pieces handy. And he's got the giant feet sticking out the back. So obviously this goes to Studio Series. And just skipping this slide, obviously Studio Series wins. It is a blowout in every single category. However, for our next character, we're actually going to be doing the inverse for the most part. AirRaiser is that one weird case where the mainline figure is generally better. I will say the only thing that the Studio Series figure does better is pose, which, makes sense considering that it is a retool of Kingdom AirRaiser, though I will say it doesn't pose as well as Kingdom AirRaiser. Otherwise, I would say that the robot mode is more appealing. I do think that this is closer to what she would look like in the movie. Like, maybe if you adjusted the sculpt a little bit, this could look more like, what her movie design would look like. Small, generally very compact, smaller wings, head still there. I can definitely see her having the bird feet in her wrists. Transformation definitely goes to mainline. I like Kingdom AirRaiser's transformation, but it's not the best thing ever, and the Studio Series AirRaiser's version of it is probably the weakest one, even when compared to the Terrorsaur retool. And then alt modes, yeah, it just has to go to, mainline AirRaiser. Even though for some reason in this picture they don't have them folded back, that is a little weird. But this has got to be the cleanest AirRaiser alt mode we've ever gotten, unless the Beast Wars figure did something, but I don't have any of those. Yeah, in general, the Studio Series figure, again, it probably has the best version of this mold alt mode, since it is all one uniform color and not just like a mix and match of gray and orange. But it does still just look like a robot crumpled into a ball with wings. Whereas this just looks like a bird. So even though I will give the Studio Series figure credit for posing better, this has to go to the mainline figure. Not even just for like I guess this is just a little bit subjective, because really they could both. both these designs could work for movie Air Razor, but I do find this design more appealing since it is a good amount cleaner, and it just objectively has the better transformation in alt mode. Then at the end of the second Jungle Mission 3 pack, we have Mirage. This is at least a bit of a contentious one for me because I remember saying that, like constantly saying in the Transformer subreddit, that the mainline figure is, it just looks better. And I'm finding as time goes on that I'm going to have to eat those words. The mainline figure just looks really cheap in retrospective. Like, this does not look anywhere as good as I thought it did. Excuse me. Meanwhile, while the Studio Series figure has all this kibble going on, I will give it that it does at least look professionally made. This at least looks like there was a lot of effort put into it with the metallic paint and that's very cleanly applied. And it doesn't look cheap, at least. Like, it doesn't look like it's completely made out of tool room colors. It is a nice dark gray, though I'm not a huge fan of the forearms being clear. I guess it also helps that he actually has a decent posture, unlike the mainline figure. Posability is kind of a tie. They have pretty much the same range in their joints, with, I'd say, the mainline figure having better knees, despite them being detented, but Studio Series Mirage having actual feet. Honestly, I might actually be willing to give this category to Studio Series just because he has ankles at all and the knees aren't detented unlike the mainline figure. It doesn't really matter who gets this category because transformation is also going to Studio Series. It was a pain in the ass the first time, but it did get better. And and fun fact, I was originally going to give transformation to mainline, but I didn't recently, and I'm glad I did because that's shifting it right back to the Studio Series. Again, a bit of a pain when I first did it, but I have gotten used to it, and it is much smoother than it was the first time. And then the alt mode, yeah, that's easy. This, like, the Studio Series 1 is decent. Meanwhile, it's a decent approximation of a Porsche. Meanwhile, the Studio Series figure is just a Porsche. It's a very nice looking licensed Porsche, which is probably why the robot mode suffered so much. But even then, I'd still be willing to give this slot to Studio Series and just this whole segment to Studio Series. Like, it's amazing how many of the mainline figures, I say that it's really just like two of them. Like, it's amazing how the mainline figure has just soured on me over time. Like, I used to think it looked better. Now I just don't get it. Like, it's more slender than the Studio Series figure, and that is all the credit it's getting. Speaking of mainline figures that soured on me over time, we move on to the Voyagers, and we start with Optimus Prime. I understand that people like the mainline figure, at least in robot mode, but I don't get why. It just looks cheap as hell. You look at the Studio Series figure, you just look at these two, and just look at all the unpainted gray on this thing. Like, you can't even see it, but like from the waist, from the pecs down, like from the pecs to the feet, the only paint is like the blue parts and then these little red accents. Everything else is like tool room gray, and it looks so cheap because of it. Meanwhile, you look at the Studio Series figure, and everything is cast in ASV. Like, I find it hard to believe that there wasn't any blue plastic in the budget for mainline Optimus, because look at Studio Series. The only paint here is the silver, while everything else is cast in blue. Why couldn't you do that over here? Like, all this did was just do the inverse of the mainline figure, where it's a good thing that I used the Japanese images too, because I've been using the American images, but the Japanese images just make this thing look way better. The American ones had gray forms for some reason, and it made it look worse than it already did. Though I will read this, still looks really bad because of all the unpainted gray. Plus, the Studio Series figure is just objectively more accurate, so of course I obviously have to give him robot mode. Posability, I will give to the mainline one. Like, here's the thing with the mainline figure. It has a good dynamic sculpt. It's just cast in the worst plastic possible, and they didn't even paint over it. Like, I wouldn't even mind all the gray if they had just painted the shins blue. Or even just put some red on the torso. Just do that. Yeah, Transformations also going to Studio Series. The mainline one has always been a pain to handle, both not so much literal, not so much figuratively, even though these dorsal fins on the shoulders really don't like pegging in, but also I just end up the transformation into truck mode. I just finish it with hurt hands. Like my hands it just hurts my hands to do that transformation for some reason. Meanwhile, it doesn't really do that for the Studio Series figure. I find that my hands actually feel just fine when I finish transforming that one. And alt modes can go either way. They both have good front halves with, okay, well, good might be a bit of a stretch with the mainline figure because that's a lot of color mismatch. But I'd say they both have decent front cabs, and the beds is definitely what's pulling them behind. Also, for some reason in this image, the gas cans aren't fully flipped out. It's still better than the American images where the bed was just completely, mistransformed. So yeah, in general, I'd say that the mainline figure has great posing, and both of them have, pros and cons in the alt mode. But the Studio Series definitely has the better robot mode and transformation, so this segment goes to Studio Series. I understand that there are people who like the mainline figure, but I just can't get behind that thing. Moving down to the Boss Monkey, both of these figures were on my best of 2023, so it's safe to assume that I absolutely love both of these figures. And yes, that is true, but one of them has to take home the title, so let's break it down. Now, if we're talking purely based on accuracy, the robot mode for Studio Series has to win. Of course, the colors are different from this image than the final product, but even then, I'd still say that the Studio Series figure is definitely more accurate, and I'd definitely say better looking. I don't know what the hell is going on with the mainline figure, but it's just so, I guess, chunky, tubby. It looks weird. Like, it's a weird looking robot mode, is what I'm trying to say. It definitely has great posability, though. That's the one area where this definitely has an advantage over the Studio Series. It does pose a lot better. Probably because it does appear to be a heavy retool of the Kingdom Optimus Primal, which was already a great poser. So using those bones, they made another great posing figure, with the exception of the hands and the head. Alt modes, gonna have to give this one to Studio Series. Yeah, it has a little bit of jank in the legs, but it can at least stand on its hind legs, unlike the Studio Series figure. I didn't even talk about transformation. Transformation can really go either way. I was considering giving that section a tie, but I do appreciate that the Studio Series figure is doing something new, whereas the mainline figure is just the standard Optimus Primal transformation. Now, granted, it does some cool new things like the interchangeable chests and the robot feet going into the shins. But everything that the Studio Series figure does, I do think it's more interesting, so I am willing to give it to him. Yes, I love both of these, but Studio Series Optimus Primal has to take the trophy here. And then we end things with Rhinox, which aside from I'd say probably Wheeljack, this was probably the hardest one for this video. Actually, yeah, this was the hardest one because Wheeljack ended in a tie. Now, this is another case like with Cheetor where I have heard people make the argument of he was barely in the movie, so why does it matter? Again, Studio Series is mainly focused on accuracy, even if they don't always hit the mark. And, of course, this picture is very outdated. A lot of the brown plastic parts did end up being gray plastic in the final figure. But even still, I would say this is more accurate than the mainline figure, though I do like what the mainline figure is going for. This is basically like with Cheetor and technically Air Razor, Beast Wars Rhinox with the run through the movie filter. So I do appreciate what this is going for, but the Studio Series figure is more accurate. Posability absolutely goes to the mainline figure, though. It has deeper elbows, deeper knees, and much more freedom in its shoulders. While the transformation, I would still have to say, goes to Studio Series Rhinox. Mainline Rhinox is a decently fun one, but it can be a little bit stiff sometimes, especially when transforming the shoulders. And it does feel very familiar. It is basically just Kingdom Rhinox all over again, just without all the clunk taken out. That's another one of those figures that really soured on me over time. Meanwhile, the Studio Series figure is actually doing some really cool and interesting things with the upper body. The lower body is obviously pretty boring, but the upper body does do some interesting things. Yes, I have had the wrist doors pop out, but they're pretty easy to put back in, and there is a way to make them not pop out outside of driving a pin through them, which is basically just to put pressure on it while you're pulling it out. And then alt modes, this is another one where I can see it going either way. I know some people like the toaster alt mode that the mainline figure has. For me, it makes it a little hard to take it seriously. Whereas the Studio Series figure, the only problem I have with it is just the mouth. Outside of the fact that it's miscolored in this image, I didn't even notice that. That's like, no one even pointed this out to me. It just has a brown mouth. I'm not entirely sure why. This actually looks like it's yellowed. Like, comparing this to the final product, this looks like the yellowed version of that. But yeah, I do think that the Studio Series Rhino mode is more convincing as a Rhino than it's a more convincing alt mode and an easier alt mode to take seriously. But I can understand why someone would give this point to the mainline figure. And in general, I'll give this one to Studio Series, but I can understand why some people might like the mainline Rhinox more. It's just, for me personally, I do like the transformation in alt mode more, and the robot mode is objectively more accurate to the movie, so I do have to give it to him. Mainline does still get points for posability, though. And with our final results, I was hoping not to have a decimal rating, but that's how we ended up with a 7.5 to 1.5 ratio. Seven characters had better Studio Series figures. One character had a better mainline figure, and then you have Wheeljack, which is just a tie. So I'd say pretty excellent score as far as Studio Series goes. Though I will say that mainline AirRaiser is definitely the version of AirRaiser you should be tracking down, as long as you're able to get the solo release for a decent price. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it on this versus video. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. See you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.